participation and the role of law. Some of us are engaged in the court of law, fighting legal actions, fighting on various legal approaches. And then accountability is one of the important areas for all of us. And then finally, fighting for others. Now, in many of these areas, when you question some of those activities, then the government side, so they try to bring various laws, and sometimes we have experiences in some countries, they suspend the accounts, sometimes they arrest civil society organizations, the representatives, or they even question, or sometimes they have hard time to engage in the demonstration, sometimes their offices getting closed, various situations are happening. So today we have three speakers from various regions. We have Annabel Pereira from the NGO for Nation Development Bank, which is based here in Philippines. And we have Noli Grace Mercado from the Legal Rights and Natural Resources Center from the Philippines. She's the Executive Director. And we have Hassan Mehdi. He's the Chief Executive of the Coastal Livelihood and Environment Action Network, CLEAN, based in Bangladesh. And we also have Manana Kochlatz. She's the regional coordinator of the Caucasus and of the CE Bank, or Central Eastern European Bank. We also have from Asian Development Bank, Mr. Stephen Brock, who is the Vice President of the operation in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. Let me welcome all of you to the stage. Discussion. I will ask maximum and the first round. So the question and comments.
Secretary, we are independent coalition network of CSOs in Asia, dedicated in monitoring the Asian Development Bank and recently the AIB in terms of its policy and project monitoring. So for my presentation, it's safeguarding your rights in the shrinking democratic space in Asia. I'll be providing the general framework or context by which CSOs are experiencing here in the region. So first, we have seen a lot of restrictive laws being implemented by different governments. For example, you have the NGO law in Cambodia, you have the similar Foreign Contribution Regulation Act in India, as well as Foreign Donations Regulation law in Bangladesh, as well as repressive resettlement laws as well in the Mekong, including Laos, and Vietnam. So we have seen that these kinds of restrictive laws are intended to regulate how NGOs operate in these respective countries. For the Cambodians, they are saying that it is still unclear on how these kind of law will comply. Will they be able to comply with some of its vaguely worded provisions? And it forces them to actually operate under the fear of arbitrary shutdown. It has a chilling effect in Cambodia, this kind of laws. Similarly, in the case of India and in Bangladesh, this kind of regulation in terms of the foreign funding being received by CSOs are used as a tool by the government to harass CSOs, the guys, their activities are not within the national interests of their respective countries. So last year, human rights defenders, environmental defenders are being targeted. This includes 41 deaths in the Philippines. So as you can see, this photo, this is during the incident wherein Lumans were killed last year, defending their answer the struggle for many CSOs, grassroots organizations, and basically ordinary people and potentially project-affected people who will be affected, and it has an impact in terms of how do they exercise their rights in a development project. So project-affected people are forcibly displaced from their lands, their livelihoods are being impacted. To pave the way for all of this large, most of the time, it is always the poorest and large infrastructure projects who are least equipped to cope with the different facets, not only of space, but of the adverse impact of these kind of projects. So it drives it further to impossible. Now, ADB. So given this kind of context, July 2009, the ADB had its safeguards policy statement, which seek to avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse environmental and social impacts. Correspondingly, in the same policy document, it also recognizes the need to strengthen country safety and the bank's adherence of the prerequisites in using CSS, which is there should be equivalent. Even if you have this kind of framework of SPS, we have seen that there are still outstanding gaps in terms of its safeguards delivery. So for one, and this also came from ADB's own independent evaluation department, they noted that there should be a caution when using CSS to ensure that the high ADB standards are properly safeguarded and systematically strengthen the CSS. The second point, in terms of what Hemant has also provided in his overview a while ago, in terms of information disclosure, accountability mechanism in these project areas. So, according to the Office of the Compliance Review Panel, the subject of complaints really on 14 and 13.5% respectively. So these are the third and fourth main issues being raised in ADB's AR. So if you can put it in a way wherein if information is deprived on the onset, potentially affect people, then of and then third, also lack of any disclosure and reporting gaps for financial intermediary private sector projects. And then in terms of another gap, in terms of safeguards delivery, there's this increase for category B projects. And time and again, we have seen that this kind of increasing portfolio for category B projects are done in order to avoid the more stringent requirements needed for your category A environment projects. And this is done without the adequate description for the environment. So we're always pointing to ADB that yourself have identified out of the environment, and another aspect of being so again, that points out the poor quality of information with regards to environmental settlement and IPs, the pre-project approval phase. And lastly, there's also this lack of clear response on project monitoring by ADB safeguards, with almost non-existent site visit by ADB safeguard staff. Back in 2014, we were informed that there's only about field visits of actually going into the project level. Here, what we see that the ADB must do in order to address these concerns. One is prioritization by recent governments on the basis of environmental and social well-being of communities affected by these ADB finance projects, strengthening of CSS and local capacity, and emphasis on the implementation of safeguards. We have emphasized that there are good languages in the safeguard policy, but what is persistently lacking is its implementation on the ground, particularly on issues of meaningful consultation.
Infrastructure, and it's called Build, Build, Build. The ADB has indicated that the Philippines is actually entering the golden stage for economic growth, as I previously mentioned. Over the next decade, it says the government is set to embark on an ambitious $180 million infrastructure spend. This is set to transform the Philippines economy. And according to the Department of Finance of the Philippines, the government is looking at 75 flagship projects. And this includes 6 airports, 9 railways, 3 bus rapid transits, 32 road bridges, and 4 seaports. These are all large-scale infrastructure projects under the Build, Build, Build program of the government. They say it's the golden age for economic growth. It's the golden age of infrastructure. Also, according to the Department of Finance, 15 projects totaling 1.8 trillion pesos are already in the pre-construction stage, and the bulk of this will be funded by foreign loans. Also, according to experts on the macroeconomic front, the Build program is expected to widen the trade deficit that reached 2017. As the construction picks up, steel and machinery imports are likely to grow. This could put pressure on the peso, which is already at its highest levels in a decade. There's also growing debt, as my earlier slide indicated. As of the end of March 2018, the outstanding debt of the Philippines is at 6.89 trillion. Imagine how many, I was asking my colleague, how many zeros are there in 6.89 trillion pesos. So this is roughly around $130 billion. But then let's also look at the political, social, and governance challenges that the Philippines is so experts says or indigenous communities. It showed that around half of the total number of public sector loan projects funded by the bank afflicted involuntary displacement of communities. The ADB's proposed agenda of prosperity, inclusiveness, and resilience, and the proposed strategic priorities fails to consider one important but worrisome trend of the region, and this is the shrinking democratic space for CSOs and communities. This is evident in the growing incidences of human rights violation, which results to chilling effect in terms of communities and civil society groups. I'd just like to mention and to highlight one notable example of community resistance, and you can see from the screen on the lower right, this is the community in Kalinga, in Cordillera, north of the Philippines. This is the community of Makliing Dulag. Makliing Dulag is a Kalinga leader of the Butbut tribe of Kalinga province in the Philippines. He's well known for his opposition of the World Bank-funded Chico River Dam project, which gave way to a very vibrant community resistance, which also led to his death. Okay. So for my recommendation, I tried to summarize it into three. So the first one is strengthen governance. The second one is prioritize people in the environment and uphold social justice and human rights. More particularly, the ADB should not rely on country systems with weak rule of law, restricted laws on NGOs, or increasing militarization and human rights violation. ADB should also reconsider funding authoritarian regimes or governments who fail to offer space for CSOs, specifically the communities and the marginalized. Given the limited space for civil society in these countries, how is ADB ensuring that the meaningful consultations are done or are being undertaken? The ADB portfolio should not just focus on infrastructure, but more importantly on governance. And when I mean governance, it's not just on corruption, because this is also a factor of efficiency. I mean governance and pushing for the environment and social safeguards, which will give way to ensure a sustainable, inclusive growth, which will consider social justice and human rights. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Molly. Let me immediately go to the European region. So we have Speaker Manana Koshlet from Central Eastern European Banquet. So please be mindful about the time as well. So we want some questions and answers.
So, I'm representing the region where three countries are grouped. This is Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And the situation in each of countries are absolutely different. Starting from the Azerbaijan, where we have one of the most corrupted and autocratic governments led by the Aliyev for now almost 17 years, and he is just recently re-elected for next 6 years. So, and we have Armenia and Georgia, which is more democratic, more prominent, more trying to seeking the alliances, and Georgia even aspires to become the part of the European Union. But the problems, if you start to look the infrastructure development or like simply develop economic growth and the people's participation in decision making are almost the same in all three countries. Yes, in Azerbaijan, with the more restrictive government, you have less possibilities to speak up. But what is happening where the people have possibilities to speak up? Do the speaking of the communities, do the speaking of civil society are having any impact on the decisions of the government or the international financial institutions? This is really something which I really want to see here. Another thing is, yes, we have the problems with the people who are speaking on the behalf of the communities, like almost, there's no almost NGO society anymore in Azerbaijan. You are speaking up, either you're going to the jail or you are fleeing from the country. But then you have the communities in Georgia and Armenia who is often speaking up, and NGOs who are speaking up, and they don't go into the jail, but they are experiencing quite huge threats and defamation, marginalization from the government, and it becomes more and more easy because environment out of the region is quite supportive to this kind of a restriction. We have the Russia, where they have the foreign agents rules. We have the Turkey again, we have lots of the human rights violations. So practices of the Georgian or Armenian governments are the same. While you are not put into the jail, you are called by the high-level people as the foreign agent, as the Russian spy in Georgia, for example, which is quite problematic issue if you recall the relations between Georgia and Russia recently. So, and they try to really undermine all the efforts of the communities. As soon as you are coming with the subject that there is for the projects which the government is pushing for, there is a problem with the environmental protection, there is a problem with the social impact, there is a problem with the a fiscal effect, which will be dangerous for all the country. The argument is all of these are, you're speaking all of that because they are Russian spy or you're a foreign spy, and this is one of the very effective way how to dismiss all these concerns without concretely answering any question which is put on the table. Then, if we look how the international financial institutions are impacting all the country. In all three countries, these institutions are the major funders of the large infrastructure. The region is very risky, so everybody, large public or private investors, they requiring some risk guarantee, and the IFIs are giving them with these presents. However, then even in these cases where you may have some more accesses to some remedies because of the accountability mechanisms or because itself in theory the IFIs safeguard policies should be higher than the country systems. Still, it's not really that way. And I can bring you two examples, one from Georgia and one from Azerbaijan, how the things never work in that particular cases. You have the largest pipeline which starts from Azerbaijan and ending somewhere in Albania and Europe. And IDB provided funding for the upward project which is called gas exploration in the Caspian Sea. It was funded, and then this gas is pumped through the Taptanaf pipeline, which is funded by all of the international financial institutions, starting from the World Bank, EBRD, EIB, and so on. And you have the very poor community in the Shakir region, who in 2014 has agreed with the BP British Petroleum for some compensation, but the compensation was paid in 2017 when the Azerbaijani manat was deterritoriated 3 and even sometimes in 4 times. But the compensation was paid in agreed manats of 2014. So now these people start to seeking the remedy because they start to understand that they stay without compensation and they are losing quite high income. However, none of the bank is responsible for this kind of situation because Asian Development Bank claims that they fund only the gas exploration in the Caspian Sea. World Bank and EBRD fund the Azerbaijan, but for construction of the pipeline in Turkey. So this particular route, which is called as a Sangaçal terminal towards the Georgian border, where people don't receive the compensation, they stay without proper and adequate compensation, and you couldn't really go to any remedies to really get that thing. And I reminded that in Azerbaijan, the international organization couldn't anymore travel when we asking the journalists to go and check the facts on the spot. It's really dangerous for them, and we are really putting all the risk preparations. This is one issue. Another issue is Georgia, where you can say, okay, they have the public consultation, media is relatively free, lots of the CSOs. But then you have the situation when people are protesting against some particular dam, and suddenly in the area where in the total region is like 11,000 of the people are living, you are suddenly getting 300 policemen from the other parts of the Georgia just to secure the investors' right to start the construction. And of course, it's increasing the devastation of the people. And then you have the situation when the accidents happening and the companies are pushed up to get out of the region, and then the government are thinking to bring even more security forces. So you are getting in the situation when actually the government in a way just to fulfill the investors' rights, are really against the people. And what is the thing about? The thing about, the thing is that before the government takes the decision, sell that concession or sign the memorandum on that particular project, they never consulted the public. Do this public wants that particular development in that area or not? This is the major problem where the things start. Meaningful consultations means not only to have the formal presentation of the environmental impact assessment, but also listening what people want, and based on that, take the decisions. This is never happening. And I will just finalize. I will come with another very short example, again from the Asian Development Bank practice. Recently, we find out that country strategy paper for 2018-2020, recently published for Georgia, has one very strange statement. It says that in 2019, Asian Development Bank will provide 100 million to the Georgian government for Kobe-Kresheti road. This is like 50-kilometer road. Total project cost is around 280 million. Why I'm saying that? Because till now in Georgia, nobody has seen any document about this particular project. However, ADB already take the decision that this road will get this field co-financing. There is another problem. This is the road which has been pushed by Russia in 1986, 1987 to be constructed between Georgia and Russia. And actually these two projects with another hydro dam in Swaneti push all the independence movement in Georgia. Because for the people, these two projects are like another symbols of the Russian imperialism. And now the people again start to unite around this road, and because it will, first of all, it will make it easy for the Russians to come into Georgia. The locals say they don't need that road. They don't need that road. What they need is the access to Tbilisi, not to the Russian border. And there is lots of the landscape areas. There is some emerald network sites which is protected under the new law. So we are from the conflicts are start. So next year we will have another big conflicts with the already tens of these conflicts around the country, which has different conflicts around the hydropower plants, also funded by the Asian Development Bank or EBRD. So when we speak about shrinking of civil society space, ignoring the people is really one of the issues which we really need to think. And another thing which the bank already needs to take the responsibility is it should start to see what we are doing in the countries like Azerbaijan, where the human rights defenders are under the threat, where the civil society space does not exist anymore. How in this situation you are fulfilling your safeguard policies and ensuring the meaningful consultation? Because if the people, after your consultation, going outside to the street will be catched and taken to the jail, it does not really mean somehow the meaningful consultation. So banks should put very straightforward documents and on the safeguarding how you are actually behaving in this situation, or stop. It would be easiest way to stop to funding in autocratic governments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manana. Let me go to Bangladesh. Mr. Hassan Mehdi is from Green Khulna.
Thank you, Multa. If you compare with the other presenters, my presentation is actually very small and very straight from the grassroots. It's a story which is not just of one country. Uh, I'm showing three pictures, three photos of three persons. First one is Hassan Ali, he's a 53 years old. He got 105 criminal cases from Madhupur Sal Forest area. And another was Mr. Sultan Malik. He died in 2013 and he has had 34 criminal cases against him when he died. And third one is Ranjit Bawali. He's a local popular singer and movement leader. And he has 11 cases in Jessore area. So are they criminal? That's the question. Are they really criminal? If they do something which is against the interest of the people, interest of the communities, interest of any person? Not. Hassan Ali is a community leader of Madhupur Sal Forest area. 105 cases are filed against him after he joined the indigenous people of Madhupur Sal Forest area and started protesting the ADB's social forest project in Madhupur. Now, even now, after this almost 18 years, even now he cannot sleep in his own home for fear of arrest and has to visit court at least 10 days every month. Another one, Sultan Malik was a peasant leader. He protested the Khulna Coastal Embankment Rehabilitation Project, KSERP, and later Khulna Jessore Drainage Rehabilitation Project, due to faulty design of the projects. And after the campaigns, ADB's evaluation department conceding to the truth of their arguments, and ADB and the national government has taken that indigenous technology which they demanded at least 18-20 years earlier. Even then, Sultan had 34 cases against him when he died in 2013. That Ranjit Bawal, and a popular leader and popular singer, after being adversely affected by waterlogging for a decade, he started protesting the KZDRP, and there are 11 cases filed against him, and still is alive. So, what are the cases against him? One is illegal assembly, preventing the government officials from discharging their duties, illegal breach of embankment, illegal felling. Illegal assembly, you can understand that they mobilize the people against the projects, preventing the government officials when they started making new embankments, they protested them. That's why the illegally preventing the government officials. Illegal breach of the embankment means when they affected for long the water logging, they cut the embankment to they remove the water logging from that area. And illegal felling is cutting the newly planted trees like acacia, eucalyptus in the natural shallow. So these are the charges against them, and all they did was speak up for their community, their environment and their culture. So the Constitution of Bangladesh confirmed that every citizen shall have the rights to assemble and to participate in public meetings and possessions peacefully. That Article 37 and 38 of Bangladesh Constitution. But the Special Power Act says that if government is satisfied with respect to any association that there is danger that the association may act in a manner or to be used for purposes prejudicial to the maintenance of public order, it may direct the association to suspend its activities. So most times the act is imposed on protesting people, not on that real danger. The ICT Act 2006 says that if any person deliberately publishes or transmits or even reads any material which is false or offensive, creates possibility to deteriorate law and order, prejudice the image of a state, person, or an organization, then this activity will be regarded as an offense and can be sentenced, may be sentenced for 10 years jail and at least 10 million Bangladesh taka. 21 journalists, till the date, 21 journalists and 126 bloggers jailed under this act. So country systems are misused to harass and criminalize these whistleblowers who are whistleblowers for their environment and human rights. And then ADB has immunity in my country, so we have no right to go to the court against any project or any activities of Asian Development Bank. And by misusing those acts, the political space of the civil society or the community leaders are shrink, and we don't have at least the political space to protest them. And there is no protection of whistleblowers in national law or the ADB system. So, according to your safeguard policies, who are actually safeguarded? That's the major question. So, this is not just the story of Bangladesh. It's the map of 323 DC, not now. So, Malaysia, this is not the story of Bangladesh, it's the same in many countries. So, last question. You are leaving those people behind who are indirectly supporting you to be just, equitable, and sustainable. Thank you.
Humans love their life, so this is very precise. But we also care about other people, so that is why we are coming to these kind of spaces. So when we come to these kind of advocacies, it is the right, it is the duty of the other people to take care of them and to make sure that their life is safeguarded when they are bringing these kind of issues. So let me go to Mr. Stephen Brock, who is the Vice President of the Vice President Operations in the East Asia, Southeast Asia and Pacific, which one of the major part covering in the Asian continent. So it's your turn.
Thank you, Mata, and thank you to all the panelists for some really fascinating presentations and some, I think, very important questions of ADB. And I think that really that's what's critically important about these kinds of gatherings, these kinds of discussions, is an opportunity for ADB to hear a different set of voices than we typically hear in our daily work. And while sometimes these messages are difficult to listen to, sometimes they're slightly uncomfortable, they are critically important for us to hear and for you to express. And we fully respect that. And we also fully respect the space for differences in opinion and differences in view and perspective. We have our own perspective and our own views in any number of different issues. Those may be right, they may be wrong, but you also all have your right to have your opinion, and you can express those opinions in a safe and unthreatening space. And I think it's really quite a statement really to how far this institution has progressed over time, that we are having these kinds of discussions. When I first joined ADB in 1997, we didn't have anything like this at an ADB annual meeting. And for a number of years after that, there wasn't anything like this or this kind of discussion in an annual meeting. These kinds of discussions typically took place with civil society protests outside the building, and someone going and meeting people outside the building to have these kinds of discussions. So what I would ask of everybody is make these observations, make these criticisms. We welcome those, but understand that for any institution, any bureaucracy, any person, it takes time to change. It takes time to evolve into an organism or an institution that is able to process all this information in a way that's satisfactory to all different stakeholders. And also, there are areas where we're going to disagree. There are areas where we may have a different view or a different perspective. And again, I state clearly that that doesn't make us right. It just means that we take a different view. So let me touch on a couple of points that have been put on the table. I mean, first we heard from Annabelle on country safeguard systems on CSS and some concerns about the use of CSS and what that means for ADB safeguard policies and implementation of those at a country level. I think those are all very, very valid points and concerns, and I want to assure everyone that we are not jumping in to the deep end of the pool of CSS without being aware of these risks. And in fact, the only country in which we are piloting CSS at the moment is India. And we're looking at other countries in which we may attempt to use CSS, but we're not doing that yet. Indonesia is also another country that we're advanced in the discussions of the use of CSS, but we have not yet implemented CSS. So rest assured that we take these views into account. We understand the concerns that are expressed in terms of the gaps, and I think that the concrete suggestions, Annabelle, that you made on what we might do and what the kinds of things we have to keep in mind when we are contemplating the use of CSS are all very, very valid, and they're things that we certainly are paying close attention to. Norley, I think, made a very impassioned presentation on some of the risks that go along with increased infrastructure investment, whether that be in the Philippines or that be in any country context. ADB, as all of you well know, is an infrastructure finance institution. We believe very strongly that infrastructure is a critical component of economic development and poverty reduction and ultimately inclusive growth. Because without that infrastructure, what you're doing ultimately is depriving large swaths of society of access. And that can be access to any number of different things. That can be access to services, that can be access to education, that can be access to health. And while that infrastructure, that has to be done with great awareness of the risks that increased spending has, whether that be on debt sustainability, whether it be on fiscal imbalances, whether that be with respect to environment and social safeguards. So we're very well aware of those challenges. We are constantly engaging with the countries in which we work to ensure that you're doing the utmost to minimize those kinds of risks. And the broader debt sustainability concerns are also very important. We're in a world right now where it's not just ADB that's financing infrastructure, but there are many players out there that are financing infrastructure, new players that are coming onto the scene financing infrastructure. So we have to be paying very close attention to what fiscal frameworks are in place in these countries, what the debt is, and what we also implore all countries to do is to be extremely transparent around the kind of debt that they may be accumulating in the efforts to finance these large infrastructure projects. Because the degree to which those arrangements are not transparent weakens the ability of the institutions that do require debt sustainability to actually understand whether the fiscal situation is sustainable or not. So that kind of transparency is absolutely crucial and absolutely critical to ensuring that this is done in a sustainable manner, to ensure that kind of investment brings the benefits that it possibly can. And so that's just on that part of the side. On the other side, on the social and environmental safeguards side of the coin, clearly, if we don't bring these kinds of policies, if we don't bring these kinds of practices into every single infrastructure investment, not only are we risking doing damage, we're risking these not having the full possible benefits that they may have, and those benefits are important because the basic assumption is that by taking on additional debt to invest in infrastructure projects, you're positioning an economy to grow faster, which enables the country to pay those debts back. But if you're not doing the proper analysis on each individual project to ensure that you're maximizing that economic benefit, you're not then going to be putting that economy in a position in the future to pay back those loans, leading to, again, a vicious cycle of debt and inflation and currency depreciation and all sorts of other things. Not to mention that you're not doing you have the risk of the people that you're intending to benefit through these investments not realizing the benefits themselves and potentially being harmed for you. So it's really, really critical points. Manana and Hassan Norley also focused on this, the issue of democratic space, and how do you ensure, how can you ensure meaningful consultations in those countries that have more autocratic regimes, or those regions of countries perhaps that don't have, where there's limits on free speech. And I completely concede that that's hard. I totally concede that in those areas where, free speech is not necessarily a given or is constrained, it's much harder to have effective consultation in those environments. Now, as Manana, as you said, one option is that, that ADB says, okay, we're not going to go to those countries. Yes, that is an option, but I think the challenge of that is that there's still, thousands, millions, tens of millions of poor people that live in those countries that, in a sense, we punish for the actions of a few. Now, again, I'm not going to make any value judgment here. I'm not going to try to say that there's a magic bullet that we have that's going to fix all that, but it's a very careful balance that we have to strike in how do you engage in these circumstances in a way that you maximize the potential benefit of our engagement to the poorest people in the country, how you show some of these governments that kind of consultation and kind of engagement is not threatening, but actually has benefits to ensuring that those projects have as much success as they possibly can. And I'm not going to pretend, again, that we have any kind of magic approach that ensures that happens, absolutely the right way every single time. But I do think that we're completely aware of these challenges, and we work very, very hard in a lot of difficult environments to ensure that we're getting the best kind of consultation we possibly can. Now there are, as cited by a number of you, examples of projects where that hasn't been done as effectively as it might otherwise have been, where there have been failings in some sense with those processes and procedures. And again, I guess I would stress that we have processes in place through the accountability mechanism to hold our institution to account when those failings are revealed. And I realize that in those environments where freedom of speech may be curtailed, it's harder to get access to those processes. But we do everything we possibly can to ensure that those options and alternatives are available to those communities to hold our institution to account for any failings that may be revealed. And also, I think importantly, thing to keep in mind is that, and not to diminish in any way the importance of the examples that all of you have put on the table, is that these are still a relatively small number of projects when compared to the entire portfolio of the ADB. So that means that there's a huge number of projects that are very successful, are very impactful, are doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of addressing the needs of the most vulnerable people across Asia and the Pacific. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold ourselves to account for those instances where where we haven't met those commitments, where we haven't done everything that we're supposed to do. But still, it still ends up being a relatively small portion of the projects that ADB is doing. Now we should aim to have 100% success. We should hold ourselves to a standard of no mistakes, of no errors, of no shortcomings. But again, we're all human, and ultimately this institution is a group of humans, and humans are by nature not perfect. And so I guess what I would just implore all of you is to keep doing the work that you do, keep holding us to account, keep raising your voices and your perspectives and your views, because it's important for us to hear. And as difficult as it may be for us to sit and listen to this, we like to think that we're better maybe than we actually are. It's important that we are held to account, and it's important to do this. We do engage directly with so many of you. We have any number of different projects that we're actively working with civil society on the ground. We have larger regional programs that we're doing with groups of civil society actors. But any ideas you have in how we might do better, any ideas you have on other things we might do, we certainly welcome. Because again, we are sitting in this very nice building, it's air conditioned and have lots of facilities, and so we don't, we're living in something of a bubble, and we need all of you who are much closer to the front lines of this work, who are far more engaged than the average colleague of mine with the people that are either positively impacted or potentially negatively impacted by the work we do. So we want your voices to be clear and loud, so we can understand how we can improve the work that we do. And so again, I very much welcome these views, and I very much welcome this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another 25 minutes. I think it's your time. So please raise your questions, share your name, and then be sure. Start with Petra. Please come to the mic so that it will be easy for us.
My name is Peter Holbel. I'm from Bankwatch. I would like to react on your last statement about the minority of the projects. I cannot dispute that figure. Yeah, no question that's about the minority. But my 30 years experience of the monitoring different IFIs projects says differently. Anytime local community contacts us, there are some of the issues. We find always, I never turn down these requests because they would not be grounded. And we are an organization which is sitting in the Europe, even that, like thinking that there is some organization finding it and then just go to that, that's a challenge for the local groups. And I think that's, and my experience is different. Yeah, once we don't have a capacity to monitor every single of your projects. But to be true, you don't do it either. If I read your evaluation and monitoring reports, you are not able to properly monitor every single project because you don't have enough staff capacity to do that. You're leaving a lot of things to the project sponsors. And obviously the project sponsors' interest is to paint a very good picture about the public participation, about the access to information, etc., etc. So I just would like to note a bit cautiousness about the small portions of those projects, because my experience is slightly different.
Okay, can you hold your response for a moment? So we'll go back to Peter, and can you
my name is David from the ENTA Foundation based in Netherlands and Luxembourg. Talking about democratic space, as Mr. Grove said, I didn't hear much about Kyrgyzstan. I've been myself in Kyrgyzstan for the OESO as observer for the elections. I have not followed the details on Kyrgyzstan, but my experience here, there in the field was very positive on the democratic development. And also, the base on implementation of projects is held very closely with the local population. I would like to hear from the panel side, what is your view on Kyrgyzstan?
we'll go.
Thank you. I'm Sally Lola here from the Pacific Islands Association of Europe. I only have a short comment, especially for the ADB. In terms of coming from a very perspective of a small island in the Pacific, sometimes for civil society to practice the social safeguarding role, the end result of that is the streaming space, because you are challenging your government in a very small space already. And so when you're really leaving that for civil society to do that work without the leverage from ADB to our government to ensure that it's there in their policy that you provide that space for civil society. If you left it there, it ended up that the space is shrinking as an outcome of us pushing for the safeguarding role that you expect us, civil society, to play. The other one is that the fear of lost opportunity from the community. When you are doing like a road work from ADB fund, and you ask the community to play the safeguarding role, the fear of what happened? If government just pull out, there are no alternative choices. So what do? They just go along with whatever it is without playing that safeguarding role because of the fear that there is no one else to pick it up after ADP pulling out. Thank you.
Thank you. We go to that side. Yeah, please.
Hello, my name is Ivan Murila from the Asia Pacific Research Network. So I wrote all my points, so it will be fast. So ADD claims to be strongly committed to the development effectiveness principle of county ownership. However, such framework has in some cases been used to de-emphasize democratic outcomes and human lives. So my question is, what is ADB's plan to promote broadening country ownership and include citizens and civil society organizations with equal status as government and private sector? I have two comments. While we continue to push the ADB to review and improve the development effectiveness of its programs and projects, especially in regard to respecting and ensuring human rights, maybe it is also time for the bank to also rethink its hyper-growth and private sector-driven framework that is actually what's driving the deregulation of social and environmental standards in the region in the name of attracting private capital. My third comment is about the infrastructure and its relation to improving eradicating poverty in the Asia Pacific region. Infrastructure projects of the Asian Development Bank is private sector driven, implemented through privatization and PPPs, which in our experience, for instance here in the Philippines, actually makes it more difficult for poor people that are already vulnerable to advance their right to services. So that's my two comments and one question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We get only two more here. Okay.
No questions to
Coordinator Serentino from the State Union Delegation. I would like to seek more clarification or perhaps elaboration from Annabelle and Stefan on CSS. The new trade union law in Cambodia is very similar to the NGO law. And if that is a precaution, we really commend that because the democratic space is not only shrinking, but the laws are really regressing as well. And this is the importance for us, as we explained in the morning session, to have in the ADB, the ILO Port Convention as a distinct and embedded operational policy, because even national countries that may have a regressive law, national trade law, or haven't ratified yet the ILO Port Convention, they are still obligated as a member state of the ILO on the 1998 Fundamental Principles and Declaration. They cannot escape. And if we cannot have it through the accountability mechanism of the ADB, then we have the supervisory mechanism of the ILO itself.
Okay, thank you. We go that side and then this side, so then we will close for the question for this round.
Thank you very much. My name is Amar Saidu. I am representing CSC Canada, Center for International Studies and Cooperation. We have a small project in Tacloban, supporting the victims of hunger in recent summer and decade. But now I have different, I don't know whether it's a question or comments. I have been working in the development sector for many years, more than 30 years, and I have been working in different countries, including Nepal, India, Pakistan, Central Asian countries, and also I graduated from Russia, and I have some ideas about Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. I wonder why we are implementing so many projects on good governance and liability improvement in all the countries, and ADB is part of that to support the government as well as the CSOs. But, you know, nothing is happening. I frankly can say that nothing is happening. Corruption is rising at the Mount Everest, and poverty level is also increasing. The same. I don't know where. Sorry, yesterday didn't mention about Nepal. Nepal is one of them. Corruption is increasing, and poverty level also. Same I think, in other countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan. And also, I think there was a rose revolution in Georgia. But what happened after rose revolution? Poverty is there, and corruption is also there.
Okay.
Like in other Russian former Soviet Union republic. So my question is that whether ADB is doing assessment, whether the livelihoods projects and the governance projects are having failure in its
Okay, thank you very much. We go to the last question this side. Wawan.
Okay. I'm Wawan from Institute for National and Democracy Studies from Indonesia. First thing, I just want to announce you that last week there is a peasant, Mr. Pop, that died because a policeman shot him in Indonesia because they just protest that their land is accidentally become the tourism project in Nusa Tenggara Island. And there are 10 people also shot it, one died. And it is because they just protest why our land become the tourism project in that area. And this kind of situation is also become very vulnerable for all the people under the project now in Indonesia, under the same or another type of project in Indonesia. So basically, project in Indonesia now is hungry of land, and it becomes more treat the rights of people, and also it is can causing or increasing the forced displacement of people, and it is also included the project of what is ADB funded in Indonesia for today. So in that situation also, Indonesia is committed to the very increasing number of the corruptions, even for the loans and aid money in Indonesia. And then last year, our government have issued the new law, they call it Ormas law, that it is very treating our sovereignty, our CSOs in Indonesia, because under this law is the government can easily ban the civil society organizations under the quote-unquote anti-development, anti-Pancasila, anti-ideology, etc. So my question is, how the ADB can commit this, on this kinds of the situation to increasing their financing to the project plan, for the project development plan in Indonesia? And the second thing, I need to also clarify that ADB actually do not strengthening the CSS of the national, international level. What we experience in Indonesia, they just reviewing our regulation or our law and concluded it is acceptable or equivalent for their safeguard policy statement. If it equivalence or partial equivalence or can be acceptable, they will use it as the basis for continuing their financing. You said that ADB is not implemented yet, the CSS. In Indonesia, ADB has announced that they will support the electricity state enterprises project by concluding that CSS of Indonesia is equivalent to implementing this kind of project. But totally, it is not strengthening process, but just reviewing and concluding that the CSS of Indonesia is
Okay.
totally acceptable. So
Thank you.
let's move on. Thank you.
I think we got a series of questions. Some maybe little beyond the topic we have today, but it's up to Stephen. So you want to respond? Maybe maybe one of you can respond to some of those.
Thank you, and again, thank you for all the questions. Let me take the last question first. I mean first, in a lot of the points that are put on the table, in a sense, depend on what time slice you're looking at and what level of aggregation you're considering. So when I say time slice, it is true that the evaluation of country systems on safeguards is an evaluation of safeguard systems as they exist today in a country, and a decision being taken as to whether those meet ADB's policy requirements. But that isn't to say that ADB hasn't been working at strengthening these systems for decades through our work in these countries. So yes, there is no process that's attached to this evaluation that is aimed at providing capacity building, but there is a decades-long history of working with these executive agencies, working with the national government at strengthening the systems as well. So I don't think it's, again, I appreciate that it's not that none of this is absolutely perfect, and there are risks associated with these decisions, but I don't think it is fair to say that nothing is going on with respect to capacity development and capacity building in these countries. I think the other point that the previous commentator made on corruption and poverty, this is where I get the point of level aggregation, and I think that indeed across Asia as a whole and across the majority of countries in Asia, poverty rates have declined dramatically over the last 40 years, 20 years even. There are communities that have not benefited from those declines in poverty, and there are communities that have been left behind by these economic advances, and I won't say that isn't true. It certainly is, but I don't think it is fair to say that nothing has happened with respect to poverty in these countries, because indeed much has happened with respect to poverty. Corruption, certainly there are issues of corruption that remain challenging to many of these countries, and indeed a lot of the work we do is aimed at minimizing corruption risk, strengthening governance, strengthening institutions in order that they can do the best that we possibly can do to avoid the risks that corruption brings. So I don't think it's also fair to say that nothing has happened with respect to governance and corruption. Has it moved as quickly as we might like it to? No, of course we'd like it to be much better and much faster, but I do think progress has been made over time. And going back to the very first question, I think it is true that just because there isn't an official complaint lodged with ADB doesn't mean that there aren't problems. But again, it's sort of a tautology in a sense, and it's sort of hard to get at that. We have to rely on what we hear on the ground with respect to whether there are issues. And again, that's why we emphasize the important role that civil society, not just international NGOs, but local NGOs have in revealing or sending up these concerns that maybe individual communities are more constrained in their ability to contact us directly. And so that's why I think that civil society playing that role of surfacing some of these concerns and issues is critically important. On the Pacific, I think that yes, it is true that in Pacific countries, many of these countries are very, very small, and it may be hard to find the space to express concerns around projects. And given that there aren't a lot of alternatives in some of these economies, that it may curtail individuals' willingness to reveal or express complaints and concerns. But again, I think one thing that we're doing in the Pacific is that we're increasing our own presence on the ground in all of the countries across the Pacific in order that we have a much better on-the-ground understanding and feeling for how these projects are being implemented and any issues that may emerge in the context of that implementation. On CSS, more broadly, again, I think that we've talked about that, so I'm not going to go into much more depth, but perhaps Annabella or Norley would like to talk a little bit more about that. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Before go to the panel, I just take two specific questions, but I only want the shrinking civil society space, not power, not other areas, because we have other sessions to talk on that subject. Because we want to use this precious time for talking about the civil society space. Anybody? Yeah, please. Yes, sir. Can you talk to the mic, please? Can you?
My name is Mirna Bole and I am a sociologist by profession. There is something which I would like to emphasize beyond the exchange of our ideas and social problems, whether it's economic, political, or religious. The idea of social solidarity. Because beyond our differences are conflicts which are created, and these conflicts are sometimes lingering and reparable, which makes difficult for any development project to take place or to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brian?
Good to see you again, Stephen. This is interesting for me. I mean, the stories which we've heard inside the library, I've been dreaming about this moment, especially with the ADB audience in the room. And actually, I'm speaking to the progressive voices within the ADB over the years who we've engaged with, who has brought us this far in order for this discussion to happen. So I'm reaching out to those forces. What I understood from my dialogue with the president in the morning is these stories, these concerns, and these voices have now managed to get to the headquarters in Manila. And ADB is listening. ADB needs to listen at the project site with this equal, full-minded, single-minded focus. This is the difference between effective development and poor development. This is the difference between rights and violations.
Thank you. One last.
I've heard a lot of comments on shrinking space, and I believe that space is indeed shrinking across Asia, South Asia especially. My only question here is, what role does a multilateral agency like ADB envisage in making or undertaking dialogue with the governments in facilitating a more enabling environment for civil society across Asia, especially Pakistan, I should say. I believe that many of the programs that ADB implements are at the grassroots level, are through partner organizations, and the majority of them are civil society organizations. But if those organizations are not able to work or are not able to partner in order to deliver effectively, I think there is a role for ADB to play here, to undertake a dialogue where organizations that are credible, that are transparent, that are accountable should be promoted, should be enabled to deliver effective services on behalf of the providers such as ADB.
Thank you so much. Let me start with this side in the panel. So you have 1 minute because we have almost time up.
Yeah, so with regards to country safeguard systems, so generally these are either laws, agencies, or the policy framework in the EDB, which has a corresponding on the safeguard policy statement on environment, IP, and involuntary resettlement. The concern is coming from the fact that the trend across different MDBs is more of using these country systems, and considering the fact that they are, in some countries they are weak, so it reduces, that kind of due diligence, because MDB standards are generally higher as compared to your national laws. And in EDB's own words, they've also mentioned that the push for country safeguard systems also boils down to reducing transaction costs and the perception of enhancing country ownership.
Again, and this is something that I also appreciate from the ADB as compared to World Bank. They have put emphasis on the word strengthening rather than using straightforward discountry systems. So we take that from the civil society, and we hope that the EDB will remain true in terms of assessing the risks that goes along with it. And on my last note, VP Groff, you've mentioned a while ago that it takes time to change. ADB is already on its 51st year of operations in the region. So if you're really looking seriously to have a pro-poor development that is really for, taking into consideration the project affected people, their lives, livelihood, it doesn't take another 50 years, a decade or so. It should really start now.
Thank you. Noli, one.
Just taking on from what Anne said, I heard that there's discomfort when you hear about these things, and I find comfort in that you are disturbed, that you are bothered. But I hope that you don't get comfortable in this discomfort. What I mean is, we should listen, but we should also act. It's been 50 years as what Anne was saying, and I hope in the future there will be no more projects which we need to raise in sessions like this.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, there is a project named Fulbari Power Plant. It's in 2006, it's closed in 2007. ADB invested in that project and cancelled its loan only after 6 people died at that spot. So there are some problems in the system, Mr. Hall, please. And I don't see anything in the long-term strategic plan about the autocratic government and your financing. What you do if any autocratic government exists in the country. So see that 37% of the loan in Bangladesh has gone to Bangladesh during the autocratic Ershad Rezai in 1990. So I think there are problems.
Thank you. Manana?
So the IDB has a leverage on the governments in my country and in the region I'm working, and this leverage is significant because we are giving quite more money than they can get themselves. This is not issue. So you can really put forward your requirements, how to deal with the public participation for the earliest stage of the decision making, and it's pretty feasible. I understand that it's much more easy to go to the government's plan, but it's not works, and the Georgia maybe is perfect example where you may find more than 10 projects in general, and we already have the free compliance submitted to the problem solving, and it shows that something is wrong in the system. When each case the people need to go to the compliance and ask the remedy from the accountability mechanism. Another issue is, just remember that, and I'm pretty sure that you know, corruption is flourishing when the people cannot speak, and Azerbaijan is maybe the best example of that, when the Aliyev itself is like really acknowledged that he is, even by the European Council, that he is washing the money. So if we want to have something for the people, give the people space to speak what they want, how they want, and try to implement this project together with them. Otherwise, what I see in my country, which is not Georgia, you will see around 10 different conflicts around the hydros, where IDB is also involved. You will see the conflicts around the roads, where the ADB is also involved. You will see the conflict about the pension reform, ADB finance. So the conflicts. Why not to start to work for these people if you spend that amount of money?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think first to the point on not just listening here in headquarters and listening in the field and to those voices, certainly. And we are doing quite a lot in terms of making sure that we have the resources in the field in order to be able to do that work and to strengthen our oversight and administration of our portfolio in each country. And so we are making efforts that way, and it's fully taken. It's great to have this kind of discussion, but this kind of discussion has to happen in every country, not just here at headquarters. And the other question that was asked about what roles MDBs have in ensuring a role or space for civil society. I think our orientation generally is that we feel that we need to do that work through, by demonstrating the impact that has at the project level, at the program level. So the engagement we have in projects with civil society actors, we believe shows countries how effective that is as a mechanism for more successful project implementation, for projects that are going to have going to be more closely matched or have an impact that more closely matches the desired or planned impact over time. So we don't have a role in sort of telling governments how they should do things or how they should, operate. But we do have a role in sort of demonstrating what best practices are and lessons that you can draw from experience either in project implementation in your own country or in project implementation in neighboring countries across the region. I think just one point about 50 years or 51 years. I don't think it's fair to say that nothing has happened in 50 years. This is day one. A lot has happened. And as I said, when I came in 1997 to ADB, this kind of discussion was furthest from anybody's mind. And I think progressively things have improved over time. Is it fast enough? No. Could we be better? Certainly yes. But I don't think it's fair to say that nothing has happened in 50 years and we've got to start now. I think we have been working very hard at making that kind of change. And again, just to the point that I said at the beginning, there are issues. There are individual issues with projects. There are individual issues with our engagement. I've never denied that. I've never presumed to deny it. And again, we rely on all of you to help surface those concerns and help us figure out how we can improve the work that we do. So ultimately, it has benefit for the most marginalized portions of societies across Asia and Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a hot issue. So thanks, Stephen, for taking this hot seat. I think the title today is Shrinking Democratic Space in Asia and the Pacific, of course, and the challenge of ensuring social and environmental and social safeguards in large-scale infrastructure. When it comes to some of those countries, especially when 2030 agenda says you're considering fragile states, these are some of the hot issues we might face even in the future. So I think this is one of the concerns that we want to bring this issue. But I see in general terms that ADB is not electing governments. We are the people electing governments. So we are the people who are changing governments. But when the Asian Development Bank or any other multilateral banks, when they come to this space, supporting the national governments or the local communities with the infrastructure and other facilities, they have the set of policies to ensure that this kind of common space is available. So I think what we are really asking here, we need more space, we need more civil society capacity built in to engage in that space. Now, for example, if you take the environmental impact assessment law, very few people in the world, even the less than 100 people in all over the world talking to the IFIs. It's not many. So I think bringing more people, bringing more space is very, very crucial. So I'm having a safer space also very, very crucial, because that safer space is very important in those countries. But when we are asking something like better safeguards, at the moment I think it's at least the local communities can bring issues. But if there's another opportunity for the other third party to bring the issues to the Asian Development Bank, inspection mechanisms, etc., not only here but in other MDBs, I think that you can make sure that their lives, the people on the ground, the frontline communities' life are not threatened. So I think that is something you can do. I think better world is possible. That's the way we want to end this session. Thank you very much.